is in the manual as a question as well. What is the point of integrity? It doesn't have to do with innovation at all, right? But before we address that question, I'd like to hear a bit more about what you did last week. Not seeing a lot of communication from you guys last week on the Facebook group, so I have to rely on you now to be able to share what you were able to come up with regarding the question of identity and how that is impacting your project and your thinking. There's only really 3 people here, so who would like to go first?
Okay.
Hi, Mike. This past week has been a super busy one for us privately and also working on the project. We, of course, have completed identity statements for ourselves, as well as completion of a date that we went on. And during this date, we made a decision to discuss the project identity. And what we found is that it behooves us to narrow the project scope and to re-identify it and what its identity is actually going to be. So that was very beneficial. We've created emojis and had some fun doing that. It's the first time I've ever done that. And look forward to playing with those in the future. We've followed up and completed actions from before on contract creativity contracts. Got them posted, and
So
still
would you
completing our free writing. Go ahead.
No, would you? I mean, would you like to share your emoji with us, perhaps?
How do you do that?
Well, did you draw it?
Kind of.
Huh?
We're very novices in. We found the programs that you can create emojis and make it similar yourself, and then modify it and so forth. But
It's on the phone.
we're still learning on how to do all of the sharing. Let's put it that way.
So how do you do it?
Well, if it's on your phone, you can just hold it up to your camera and you can see it. But meanwhile, while you look for that,
Okay,
what do you got for us from last week?
So I had mentioned on the Facebook group that I've gotten a bit behind this week. Emoji-wise, I did have a think about that. So I'd looked at sort of the project as a lifesaver almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought of doing it as like, you know, those things in Baywatch, those they used to save people with.
A life preserver, like the round thing.
Not the round one, the almost longer one that they run, the orange thing that they run around with. I don't know what but I need to draw it and I'll send it to you. But that's kind of what I was thinking about that was the first thing that came to my mind when I thought about an emoji for it. Yeah, and then, like I said, I got a bit behind, but I've actually made progress with the project. So I kind of need to take a step back, do the identity, and then carry on making the progress I've been making. Because I'm at a stage now where I've got all the ideas out on paper, all the modules together, exactly what I'm going to put into my program, and I need to just grow it from there. So it's actually taken form. It started to actually start to have a little bit of a life of its own. So
okay. And in that process, has anything we've done so far contributed to that?
Definitely, I think one of the things that's definitely made a huge difference was finding that safe mind, safe space, and kind of moving past what I identified what was holding me back, and I started working on it, and that's really made a difference. Secondly, I've been working with the program that helps program new empowering. The both of them together has made things just sort of take off. So
Okay. Yeah. Cool. And this is, look, this is the perfect week to fall behind. Because today we're going to look at the question of integrity, and a lot of it centers around what you've done so far. Right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it can help you pick up what already happened.
Okay, perfect.
Just for fun, before we get into anything, I want you to try something out, okay? I'd like you to make, I'm hoping we didn't do this before. I might have done it on the first day, but I don't think so. If we did it already, let me know. But the game is very simple. I'd like you to make a list, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do it. Literally exactly 2 minutes. A list of everything you can think of that's red. Anything you can think of that's red. And this means things that are always red. So something that is only sometimes red, like a car, right, wouldn't be part of the list. Things that are like always red, or almost always, let's say. I mean, in other words, there's something you associate with the color red, clearly. A car, you wouldn't do that.
Just to be exactly.
I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that.
Always red. Not sometimes
Okay, that's 2 minutes.
red. Okay.
All right. Now I'd like you to make another list. And if there's anything that you think of that's already on the first list, you can't include it, right? It has to be only new things that are newly thought of. On this list, I'd like you to just write down red food. Only food.
Yeah, I did that.
Okay, the time is up. So now here's the question for the three of you. Which list is longer, the first one or the second one?
Second one.
Second.
And Beth?
Mine are the same.
Sorry?
Mine are actually exactly the same.
Exactly the same. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the weird thing, right? About 70 or 80% of people will have the two lists at least the same or the second one longer. And yet, the first list gave you a much wider option of things, right?
Yes.
For example, did anybody put a traffic light or a traffic stop
Yeah.
sign?
Yeah.
A what?
Yes, yes.
A
Yeah.
what?
Red light.
Oh, yes, I did. Yes.
Okay, so that couldn't have been on your second list, right?
No.
Right.
Not only that, but you might have included some food items on your first list,
Yes,
Adam.
yes,
right?
correct.
So it's an interesting phenomenon to notice, isn't it? That giving you a more limited set to work from actually gave you a longer list. And if it's the same length, I mean, think about it, basically longer, isn't it? Because you already didn't include things that you already wrote on the first list. Right? You would have added food items perhaps that you already had on the first list, but you weren't allowed to.
Right.
So why would that be, you think?
Because you didn't think of it as food in your first list.
Narrows your scope of thinking.
Exactly, right? So one of the interesting things that I just wanted to highlight with this exercise, right, about integrity is that the more we are specific and real about things, the easier it actually becomes to think, right? So one of the things that people think is the broader scope you have for some sort of stuff, it generally makes it, easier to come up with ideas, right? But in fact, this kind of research will show you that that's not true. That in fact, when you have a more defined set to work in, you actually find it easier to think, which is kind of opposite from what your intuition would tell you, right?
Right.
So when we're going through today's topic, it's interesting to notice or remember that being more specific and being in reality will actually give you a lot more thoughts and a lot more ability to think more quickly and more readily than it is to have more opportunities that aren't real, right? So that brings us to the basic question when I ask, what is integrity? And if we had a lot of people, I'd write down on like a whiteboard all of the different meanings, but with just a few of us, let's just go ahead and discuss it. What is integrity to you?
Integrity is being, is staying true to yourself and staying true to what you say you're gonna do.
Okay, true to yourself, what you say you will do. Okay, what else?
I was also going to say, for me, integrity is also doing what you say you'll do and being honest. Being upfront and straightforward, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you do it, no matter who's watching or who's listening, if you say you're going to do something, you do it because that's what you said you'd do. It doesn't matter if you get applause for it or get recognition.
Okay. So being true to yourself, doing what you say you'll do, no matter what, being honest, straightforward, that's integrity. Yes, no, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, all of these definitions are very much on point, right? I'd like you to consider, there's a couple here that we're going to work with more closely. And I want you to notice that being honest is going to turn out to not have anything to do with integrity at all. But we'll come back to those words a bit later, but you guys are basically on point. But I'd like to pull out one more definition that we didn't quite get, but it kind of fits in there, right? Any idea what this picture is?
A pie.
No, it's a bicycle wheel.
A bicycle wheel, okay.
Yes. And I can't take credit for how bad it looks because it's done with graphics. But if I drew it by hand, it would look really bad. So luckily, not working on a board, and it's just a graphic there. The idea is that a bicycle wheel has one pertinent feature that is very, very important. And what is that? What makes a wheel a wheel?
It has integrity.
Well,
You can count on it to stay, hold you up.
not necessarily. What makes a wheel a wheel?
It's round.
It's round.
It's round, right? It's round. A wheel that's not round is not a wheel, right?
Correct.
Okay. What are the points of a spoke in a bicycle wheel? Why do they have the spokes?
Keeps
See,
the wheel
it's a-
round.
It keeps the wheel round, right?
Right. It's the integrity of the wheel.
Well, exactly. But what do we mean by the integrity of the wheel? It means that it's round, right? So what I want you to notice is that this is actually a written definition in vocabulary.com, right? Integrity is an undivided or unbroken completeness with nothing wanting, meaning basically that the thing is complete. It is what it is, right? A wheel that's not round is not quite a wheel. So if you're driving a bicycle and you run into the curb and you dent the wheel slightly, does it have complete integrity?
No.
Doesn't, right? Because it's not round anymore. So in order to have integrity, something has to be exactly what it is. Now it's easy to measure whether a wheel is round, right?
Yes.
But it's a lot harder to measure whether we are what we say we are,
Definitely.
right? So when we're dealing with the integrity of a wheel, it's pretty simple. It's got to be round and it has to roll, right?
Right.
If for some reason it's made out of some material that's so heavy it can't roll, it wouldn't also be a wheel that has integrity. It would be something else, right?
Yep. Yes.
So if you had a square wheel that otherwise looked like a wheel, it wouldn't be a wheel, it'd be something else, right? And no matter how many times I tell you it's a wheel, you're going to say, no, it's not a wheel because it doesn't have the integrity that a wheel has to have. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay? So it's the quality of being itself, being one thing, whole and complete, right?
Yes.
As long as the wheel is not round, it's not a wheel. Or another way of saying it, it's a wheel that has no integrity as a wheel. And what happens if you ride on a wheel that's slightly dented?
You get a very, if it holds you up, you will get a ride that's not too good on a bicycle.
Okay, so the ride is not great, right? It becomes harder to ride?
Yes.
And does the wheel, is it likely to continue getting worse, the wheel itself?
Yes, it is, and eventually it will break and you'd fall down off your bike.
And if one of the spokes comes off, similar problem, right?
Yes.
Eventually it will bend and it becomes hard to ride and it becomes unpleasant. And it also then will eventually stop working completely, right?
Correct.
So I'd like you to apply that thought to yourself. If you were a bicycle wheel, so before I say this, you pretty much from what you've just said would say that if you're driving a bicycle and it gets dented on the wheel, the thing to do is what?
To go get it fixed or get a new wheel.
Okay, so stop riding and fix the wheel, right?
Yes.
Okay, or get a new wheel. So if we apply this to ourselves, right, that when we go out of integrity, in other words, right, going back to our list that you guys made, if we go out of these things and are not being ourselves, it becomes harder to ride us, doesn't it?
Yes.
And if we don't stop and fix the problem, eventually it will break.
Yes.
But most of us, if not all of us, don't do that, right? Do you, or do people you know, stop and check their integrity regularly and see if they're being themselves?
No, just live your life.
And if you do stop and check your integrity and see if you're being yourself and you notice you're not, do you fix it before you carry on?
No. Or some people, yes, I guess, if you notice it.
Well, I'm not sure, right? But I'm asking you guys because you're here. Beth, what about you? You feel like that's something that...
Okay, well, yeah, well, I think because of the work that I do and the work I've done on myself, I do regularly do that. If something's not working, I look at me and ask, why is it not working and where am I not being true to myself?
Gotcha.
And this is the work I want to do with people, because I think a lot of people have completely lost touch with who they actually are and going through the motions. And if you're not self-aware, then you will start to get to a point where you start to burn out and you break. If it is part of one of the things that I talk about, is that if you're not being authentic and true to yourself, you can only do that for a certain amount of time before it makes you burn out, because that's basically what happened to me in the past. So
perfect. So what we want to do now is start applying that to this process, right? And what I've done is put this into this place because it's a nice pause between creating a space to work from and building up an identity or clarifying it, and then trying to get new ways of thinking, right? So what we want to do is start to look at, are we being what we said we're going to be? And is the project being that, right? And yes, you guys have already said this, are your words and your actions aligned, right? Are you saying you're going to do stuff and then you do that? Chances are good that you're not doing it as much as you think. Because it pretty much works that way. If people start noticing this, they start to notice how much they say things that don't happen, right? Now, some people are very aware of that and try to deal with that. Other people aren't aware of it. But the bottom line is, it doesn't really matter, right? Whether you're aware of it or not, if you're not acting on it. And again, some of us are more clear about that than others. But the bottom line is, from what I've seen, most people actually realize that their words and actions aren't aligned as much as they think when they start paying attention. What's even further out for people is their thoughts. Right? How often do you have a thought that you're going to do something that you don't do? Small things too, right? Like, I think I'll go downstairs now, and you don't. That kind of stuff happen to you?
Yes.
yeah.
And around the project that you're working on, have you had some thoughts about the project that you're going to do, and then you don't?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Okay, so people often, say that what you say you do is an important element of integrity, right? And that's true because it aligns you with being whole and complete. If you're saying stuff, but then you don't do the stuff you say, then you're not complete, right? It's like you can expect a wheel to be round, and if someone sells you a wheel that's not round and doesn't say this is not a correct wheel, you have every reason to say, hey, you didn't sell me a wheel, you sold me something else, right? Or you sold me a dented wheel and told me it was a wheel. So words and actions people get easily, although it's hard to make it work. But thoughts and actions, right? You'll notice that a lot of thoughts you have don't get followed up on. And when we're dealing with your identity, remember, one of the basic things about identity is who you think about yourself as, right? So if you're thinking about yourself as a certain type of person, or you're thinking about your project as a certain type of person or thing, and you're not taking the actions that align with that, you are out of integrity. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The funny thing is that the more you align your words and actions, the more your thoughts will come into line. Right? The more that you actually do what you say, the more you will start to think only things that you intend to do. And again, like, Millie, I know that you have, expressed that you have a hard time stopping your mind from thinking, right?
Yes.
So you will have more than the average person, lots of thoughts going on that never get followed up, right?
Yeah.
And that is out of integrity. So if you were to approach that situation as a matter of integrity and clarify for yourself what kind of thoughts actually belong to you and what kind of thoughts actually belong to other people that you're thinking about their thoughts, does that make sense?
Yes.
Then you would start to have greater integrity around this combination of thoughts, words, and actions, right? Because lots of people intend to have integrity by saying, oh, I try to do what I say, but very few people actually try to do what they think they're going to do. Or if we don't do it, to actually say to ourselves, okay, I thought that, but I'm not going to do it. Right? Okay, I thought I'm going to go out to a party tonight with my friends, but actually I feel tired and I'm not going to go. I never promised them, but I promised myself I'm going to go. So let me tell myself I'm not going to, right? Again, that begins to align our thoughts with the kind of statement of who we are in our identity, right? Unless we've said in our identity that we're a liar. Because it has absolutely clean integrity to say, I'm a liar, and then lie. And that's why I said before, like the word honest doesn't really fit, right? Because you can actually lie and have integrity. Like our favorite example, and shouldn't really say this on a recording, but Donald Trump doesn't have integrity because he pretends he's telling the truth. And yet he's like the Guinness Book record holder in lying, right? But if he actually stood up and said, look, I don't care if I'm telling the truth or not, I lie all the time, that would have a lot of integrity, right? Now, most people don't want to be a liar, so they don't choose that identity, and then they're not going to do that. But the point of it is that when we're talking about, integrity means who you say you are is who you are. So looking back at last week and the identity process, what we want to start to do is make sure that what you're setting out to be and what your project you're setting it out to be are actually on track, right? And if they're not, which they probably aren't completely, then to adjust that by either adjusting your identity or adjusting what you're saying and doing, right? Does that all make sense? Now, another way of looking at this is that your values and your intentions are aligned, right? In other words, are you setting out to do the things that are aligned with your values? And your values would somehow be expressed in your identity statement in a way, right? But what we're going to do at some point shortly is to look at what your values are, especially around this project and around yourself as an innovative thinker, right? Because identifying your values clearly will give you a greater clarity in being able to maintain integrity with your actions. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then when we talk about purpose, it's a complicated word, but really it just means your larger picture of what you're here for, right? And obviously that would need to be aligned with your values and intentions for it to make sense and have integrity. If your big picture promise to yourself is not aligned with your values and your daily intentions, then it's never going to happen, right? So just a couple little fun quotes. There's a bunch of them in the manual, but this one from Alan Simpson is a fantastic quote about integrity, describing why we need to have integrity in our lives, right? If you have it, nothing else matters. And if you don't, nothing else matters. Doesn't define it, just pretty much tells us why we need it, right? Nothing else but integrity matters. Any thoughts on that? No? Mm-hmm. Okay, second quote from Mr. Warren Buffett, one of the great investors of all time. And looking for people to hire, he looks for three qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. He says if they don't have the first one, integrity, the other two will kill you. Right, so basically saying intelligence and energy are really great, but not if you don't have integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, when we ask the question, why integrity, in the manual, I've listed a bunch of reasons why it's important. Besides, some of them are not as obvious as others, right? But I just want to run through them quickly because there's some interesting things about each of them. One of them is effectiveness. I think, do we need to talk about at all why having integrity makes you more effective?
Then you do what you say you'll do.
You do that, and we touched on it with the bicycle wheel, right?
Mm.
As soon as the wheel is not what it is, then it becomes less effective. Riding it becomes harder, we said, right?
Mm-hmm.
And less pleasant. So we are basically dealing with the same thing with ourselves. If we're not going to be aligned with who we say we are, then our words are not creating the person that we are being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we're doing two things at the same time. We're saying that we're one person, we're behaving like another. We are splitting ourselves, right? So
Yeah.
we're focusing on the project itself that you're looking at. It's the same thing. Are you moving with the project in the direction exactly that you've said, or are you in fact kind of all over the place, sailing left and right and tacking in the wind, So effectiveness is one thing. Reality is another. When we start to look at things with integrity, we also start to notice where we're actually perceiving things emotionally and where we're actually perceiving things in reality, right? Because emotion is never going to give us an accurate picture of what's going on. So one of the things we can do that has integrity, for example, is to measure things like, if you say you're going to work for 2 hours, how do you know you worked for 2 hours?
Time it.
You have to time it, right?
Mm.
You say you're going to write 3 pages, you have to look at the thing and see that you wrote them, right?
Mhm.
So if you apply that all the way around, then integrity demands measurement, right? You can't really tell if a wheel is round necessarily just by guessing. You might have to measure it, right? Unless it was so far out of round that it was obvious. But normally, it might just be a tiny bit, right? And that tiny bit could cause all kinds of problems if you were a racing bicyclist or something. So the second reason why integrity is very important is that it actually gets us related to reality. Measuring things and making sure we've done what we said when it's not clear. Okay? Other people become trusting of you, right? When you behave in the way you say you're going to behave consistently. Again, the same way you will trust your bicycle when the wheel is round, and you're going to start distrusting it when it feels like it's not, right? And if you think about yourself with other people, you're going to trust other people much more when they do what they've said, right? If every time someone delivers late, if every time, people don't do things the way that you agreed, you're going to, after just 3 times maybe, start to really distrust them, right? Now, there's a lot of information in the manual and stuff that can refer to other things, but trust is ranked pretty much as the most important thing in a team in getting things done. If people don't trust one another, they don't really manage to get results, right? So if you're working in a team at all or trying to lead people, you're never going to get anywhere without constantly paying attention to, are you delivering what they expect, right? And notice what they expect also means sometimes you might not realize you said something, but they heard it that way. And they need to get what they think they're getting, or have you clarify it, right? And not dodge the fact that you said it in a way that allowed them to think something. Okay? Another benefit why integrity is important is trusting yourself. Do you notice that when you do things that you promise yourself, you feel better about yourself? You feel like you can trust yourself more, right? It gives you a feeling of strength and feeling of clarity and power, right? Which leads me to the next thing, which is clarity. Again, if you get related to reality, when you have integrity, you start to be clear. This is who I am. This is what I've said I am. And that will then be able to be played out forward in a way that you've said, right? It becomes clear to you when you measure these things and start to notice, did I or did I not achieve what I said? Did I or did I not do what I said? Now, the question is, what is the biggest problem people probably have, including us, with doing what we say?
I suppose our thoughts sometimes get in the way. Our beliefs about ourselves can get in the way.
All of that does.
Um,
But where does the problem start?
what
Most people, most of the time.
with not being clear on who you actually are.
That's also a big factor, right? But for me, what I've noticed is that it really starts with what people say.
What people say. Okay, yeah.
Because most of the time, people don't have any clue what they just said, right? I mean, a lot of the time, people will make implied or clear promises without realizing they've really made that. Like, how many times do you get this from other people where they say, I'll get you that by Monday, and they send it to you on Tuesday? You guys get stuff like that happen?
Yeah,
Yes.
they're always late.
Yeah. Right? So they have no intention of getting it to you when they say it. Right?
Well, they may have the intention, but something may have happened that they didn't get the delivery in time.
Well, what I'm saying is in most cases, what I've noticed is that it starts with the promise. Most people either don't realize they're making a promise, they just make it feel like to them it's some kind of general idea. Like, hey, I'll send you that on Monday, but in their head, they haven't put it down as Monday. Right? Or they don't even realize they made a promise. Because most communication, people try to avoid being responsible for a promise, right? Which gives no opportunity for all of these benefits of integrity to happen. Because if I don't make you a promise of when I'm going to give you the result, then I can't meet the promise, right? I don't have a measurable way to see if I did or not, right? So in order to be able to have integrity, you have to start with, if you're going to create an identity, you have to create it, right? If you don't create it, you can't test whether your identity has integrity because there's nothing to test. And the last one, which very few people find, is that integrity brings a sense of pleasure. Now, a lot of people approach integrity as something that's hard, right? Which is bizarre if you think about it. It's hard to be yourself, right? Again, a lot of people think integrity demands that you do things on a certain time frame, or that you are better than you are, you know, that you actually achieve higher than you must. But that has nothing to do with it, right? If you say, look, I can't do it in time that you want, I can't do it by Monday, I can only do it by Wednesday, that has integrity. If that's the way you are and that's what you can achieve, right? You're a person who doesn't like to go into the city to do work and you don't want to and you don't have to, then as long as you are clear about that, then you can be that way, right? It doesn't have to be hard. It actually is pleasant, isn't it? When you realize that you're doing the things that you say and you're being the person that you are. Isn't that fun?
Yep.
I mean, if you're doing the project the way that you've set out and you're getting ideas that fit what you want to come, isn't that fun?
Yep.
The purpose of all this is like really to get yourself aligned with yourself in a way that's going to give you pleasure. Now, how do we do this? Right? This is a pleasure quote. Zig Ziglar, you guys may have heard of, says that integrity gives you freedom because there's nothing to fear. Because you have nothing to hide, right? Because again, you're saying exactly who you actually are, right? If you're smoking cigarettes in the back of the house because you don't want your husband to see it, right? That doesn't have integrity because you're telling people you're not doing that when you are. But if you're telling people that's what I'm doing, I can't stop, I'm doing that, then you are not hiding anything, right? It's the same with your project. If you are doing your project in alignment with the identity you're projecting, there's nothing to hide about it, right? And again, even if you're a liar, as long as you're telling people you're a liar, you don't have to hide that. So here are some ways that we can build integrity outside of the process of creativity. One is being on time. This is the easy one, right? It's just a simple practice because being on time is implied. If you say, I'll meet you at 10, it's a promise, right? If I say I'll meet you at 10 or I'll call you at 10, then if I don't do that, then I'm not keeping my word, right? And in a simple way, this kind of integrity is so simple, right, to achieve because it's the easy measurable thing. It's easy to say, did I achieve it or not? Simple, right? I'm either there at 10 or I'm not. You know, does it have integrity to say, I'm sorry I'm 10 minutes late, but traffic was bad? Well, not really, right? But if you know on the way there that you're not going to make it in time and you can communicate to the person that's the case, then it kind of helps with that, doesn't it? I mean, cell phones have helped with integrity somehow. So this is the easy practice when you're out of it, but honoring your word, I don't know why I put this picture, but I just couldn't find another one. Honoring your word doesn't always mean keeping your promises, right? It means that if you don't, you value your promises in a way that allows you to make sure that you clean up anything that you're not keeping, right? Like I said before, even in your thoughts, if you think you're going to do something that you're clear you're not going to do, it's useful to tell yourself, no, I'm not going to do that. I just thought that, but it's not actually what I'm going to do. I shouldn't be thinking that because I'm not going to do it, right? The same thing with other people. When you make a promise, say I'm going to, you know, deliver that by Monday. If on Saturday you can already see that's not going to happen, to let that person know because you value your promise, right? Saying no to people, another good way to practice integrity. Don't say yes to stuff you're not going to do or not going to do in the time frame they want or not going to do in the way they want. You guys ever have that experience where you say yes to stuff you know you're not going to do? Or you say yes to stuff and realize later you're not going to do it?
Yeah.
Okay? So saying no is good practice. Integrity, just say, I can't do that because whatever. Right? Get rid of the past conditional, right? In other words, don't say this should have happened, right? Or it could have gone that way because it didn't. And I mean, this for me is personally one of the biggest changes that happened in my life because I used to always think about what could have happened differently than it did, right? And that literally has zero integrity because it did happen the way it did, right? And one of the great things about the past is that the past has happened. So in most cases, outside of the post-truth nature of things, you know, in our world now, but where we actually have facts that make sense to us, we know exactly what happened, right? If we didn't deliver something we were supposed to or didn't achieve something we wanted, we know we didn't. So the reality to think about what could have or should have or, you know, might have happened is very disturbing to our ability to be in integrity because we are thinking about something that's not real. And not in the future as an idea, but in the past as an idea, right? And past ideas, I mean, ideas about things that are already over are not useful, are they?
No.
So getting rid of the idea that something should have been or could have been different would also up your integrity. As we already said, putting attention on thinking, saying, and doing, right? Putting attention on what did you say today and did you do what you said? And how can you fix what you didn't, you know, clean up what didn't happen the way you said? And likewise with your thoughts. Another thing is to practice with yourself, right? Before you worry too much about your integrity in the world with others, how much of what you're saying to yourself is happening? Because a lot of the time we're regulated by society to think, I must make sure that I told you this, so I'm going to do it, right? But a lot of the time we let ourselves down. You know, addictive behaviors often do that, right? Whether it's smoking cigarettes or whether it's eating too much or whether it's sleeping badly, whatever it is, we tell ourselves this and then we don't do it. So it's great to practice with ourselves because there's really nobody else involved that we're trying to disappoint, right? And if we can get it right with ourselves, it's easy to get it right with other people. Another way to practice integrity is to do smart thinking, right? Smart goals. You guys all familiar with SMART goals?
Yeah.
No,
No? Okay, quickly. The idea behind SMART goals is that they are very measurable things. Right? So you make a goal, you make sure that it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant to your overall project, and time-based. Now, the thing is, if you look at these words, you'll notice that most of them are the same thing, right? I mean, if it's specific, then it should be measurable, right? If it's attainable, you know, but not relevant. I mean, I don't know people that often set out to do goals that aren't relevant to their project, but it is useful to think about, because sometimes the more complex things become, you know, like Beth, with your project, it would be easy to do things that aren't as relevant as other things, right?
Yeah, of course. It will be easy. It's easier to do the easy things first because your mind chooses that. The things that start becoming harder, which are things that probably are the most important thing to do, you will often just put to one side. Exactly.
Okay, and time-based, again, is just measurable, right? You can't measure it if it doesn't have a time factor. So when you're making a goal, you want it to be basically saying that it is, you know, I'm going to finish writing 20 pages of my book by Wednesday at 6 p.m. Right? Now, is that specific? Yes, right?
Yes.
Is it measurable? Yes. I can say if it was 20 pages. You know, based on the idea that a page is a certain size that I know, right? Is it attainable? Well, it's a question. Could I write 20 pages in 2 days? I think I could, right? Is it relevant? Yes, I want to finish my book soon. And is it time-based? Yes, I gave myself a deadline, right? So that would be a SMART goal. Now, it kind of, you know, seems obvious, but a lot of people make goals that aren't SMART, right? A lot of people make goals that can't be measured, right? One of my goals for next year is that I get 10,000 people to pass through my work, whether it's reading my book, doing videos of this program, or whatever. Now, that might seem crazy with 3 of us on this call, right? But I'll know at the end of the year whether I achieved it or not. Is it attainable? I believe it is, right? But the point is, it's measurable, isn't it? And it's
Yes.
something that I can adjust myself to or adjust my... Now, I've added a C to the SMART goals. This is my own little thing, which is celebration. Very few people celebrate when they achieve a goal. Do you guys? Whenever you achieve something you set out to do you celebrate?
Sometimes I do actually.
Okay.
Not always, but yeah. It's
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
I think the big things definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So the big things you celebrate, right?
Yeah.
So here's what I'm going to ask you to do for this week at least. Celebrate all of it.
celebrate all of it.
If your goal for the day is to sit down and work for 2 hours on your project and to deliver X result, right? If you sit down for 2 hours and don't deliver that result, should you celebrate?
I think you should still celebrate the fact that you sat down and did it. It's a small win, but if you don't, I don't know, I still think you should at least give yourself the fact that you showed up and you tried to do some of it. You should still give yourself that.
Yeah. And if you sit down for 1 hour and after an hour you get interrupted for some reason and can't finish your 2 hours, should you celebrate?
Yes,
Yeah.
because you still did an hour. Yeah.
Why not, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's the difference. If you have a big goal, you probably put ahead of time, in your mind at least, clarity of what celebration you're going to have. Like, I'll treat myself to a day camping if I finish this, when I finish this thing. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
What we don't often do is plan our daily celebration ahead of time. Like, okay, today when I'm done with what I'm doing, I'm going to dance for 5 minutes to the song I like. or I'm going to jump up and down and scream, or I'm going to go for a walk, or whatever it is that you're going to do to celebrate, right? So what I like to suggest is that when people are doing SMART goals, they add celebration into it at all levels. So not only the big picture goal, but the daily one. So one of the tasks this week will be for you to actually, build that into your working schedule. It doesn't, I mean, celebration is up to you, right? Some people might want to drink a glass of wine or two. Some people might want to meditate. Some people might want to watch their favorite TV show. Whatever it is, planning it ahead of time means that you're looking forward to it the whole time, right?
Yeah.
And then you get it, regardless of the result. Because your creative mind does not always deliver. And you've spent many years, as we talked about, either ignoring that mind or shutting it down and insulting it, right? So the last thing we need to do is, only let it celebrate when it wins. A lot of people don't celebrate at all, right? But even people who do very seldom celebrate even when they fail. And I'm using fail very loosely, but when they don't get their goals, they don't celebrate, right? But why not? Because the point is, your creative mind gave it the best shot that it could. Mm-hmm. Right? So we want to reward that behavior. We don't want to say, oh, nice try, but it wasn't good enough. That's like seriously like suppressive parenting, So having talked about all these things, we're going to get to the idea of creating a values statement, which is very simple. It's literally a list of values that you embody as an innovative thinker and that your project embodies as a project, right? Those two things are often, those two things have to be in some kind of alignment, but they're often not exactly the same. In your manual, there's a bunch of examples of value statements from real companies, right? But I'm going to show you just a couple now, just to give an idea of what they can look like, okay? So here's mine for this project, right? The values that I chose were integrity, irreverence, clarity, compassion, and voice. And I got to these in a process of elimination, right? I had about 20 of them. And I started to take out the ones that were duplicated, ones that resembled each other. Like responsibility and integrity go together, compassion, self-love go together. Those kind of things. I also decided, let me give it a little more clarity because these words don't mean a lot, right? So I added a sentence to them, say, integrity means to me that I am who I say I am, which we've discussed, right? Irreverence means to me there is no sacred cows, especially not me. So one of my main values of what I do is to set out to say, look, nothing is true. Nothing is for us to worship, right? Everything is to be questioned. Clarity means to me, I aim to perceive reality and communicate in a way that other people can hear me. In other words, I want to perceive things clearly, but I also want to communicate clearly. And where I'm not communicating clearly, I can take responsibility for that and make sure that the way I'm dealing with that needs to get cleaned up. When I say compassion, I mean the idea that everyone makes mistakes, but there are no mistakes. Bit Zen, right? And finally, voice. So people like to be heard. So my value is to listen to them and also listen to me, because I also like to be heard. So that's my values statement. That's it, right? Now, it's easy for me to check in any given moment if the way I'm delivering my programs or the way I'm writing about things in my blog or whatever, is it matching those values? So here's a question. So far in the few sessions we've had, am I delivering on those values?
Yes.
Definitely, yes.
Beth, you sounded uncertain.
No, yes, I'm saying yes. No, as in, I definitely think you. I was just reading again. There's no sacred cows, especially not me.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I may say a lot of things, but conviction doesn't mean I think I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
Just what I've observed. So, and to me, that one is a very critical one because I think very few people would, that's a very unique one to my perspective, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Everybody says integrity. Lots of people say compassion, right? But to me, the irreverence is very important to who I am. Ultimately, I might sound like I know what I'm talking about, but in the end, nobody does, you know? So here's one value statement for a real company. This is their actual value statement. Can you guess what company this might be?
That has something to do with bears.
It does indeed have something to do with bears. It's the Build-A-Bear Workshop. Now, this is, in my mind, a good value statement, right? Not only is it very clear and simple, but it's fun and kind of connects to their name, right? The Bears. So, reach, learn, diversity, collaborate, celebrate, and give, right? This is clear what they are about, what they stand for. Yeah? Is it? You?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So I consider this a very good value statement, right? Here's one that I would suggest is not as good. This is literally a real value statement of a real company.
Oh.
Work hard, desire to be the best, be courageous, display urgency, persevere, innovate, follow the golden rule, adhere to principles, treat others with respect, put others first, be egalitarian, demonstrate proactive customer service, embrace the SWA family, have fun, don't take yourself too seriously, maintain perspective, celebrate successes, enjoy your work, be passionate, team player, safety and reliability, friendly customer service, low cost.
It's everything is like a dictionary. Just throwing out has
Right?
no meaning.
It is pretty much like they took everyone's suggestion in the company. And I mean, the bottom line is we all believe in most of these things, right? But if you want to communicate to somebody, including yourself, what you're really about, is this kind of value statement going to help you refine your thinking? Right? Your mind is going to go every... What's that?
Too broad, too much. It means nothing because there's too much of it.
Southwest Airlines. I don't know what they're thinking, but anyway, that's their value statement. So you can see that, you know, Build-A-Bear Workshop, very simple. None of it is more than one word. And, you know, connects very well to their actual company in terms of the bear, right? Just funny, but also keeps you thinking about the bears. This one, not so great. So if I asked you to write a value statement now for your project, right? First step for your project. What would you come up with quickly? I'm going to give you 5 minutes to write down. You can write down as many values as you want and then start getting rid of the ones that don't stick out for you as the best choices, right? So what you want to do is write down the values you think are most important to your project, the ones that you would like people to see in your project, you receive from your project, you know, the way you'd like your project to be known in terms of what it stands for, right? Whether it's things like this or a few of these, it doesn't really matter as long as they're authentic to you, right? And I mean, they may not stay the same. Already looking at the values I've shared with you from Create Your Creativity, I can see that 1 or 2 of them might just have fallen away when I think about ones that are more important. But for now, if you write down 10 or 20 like Southwest, it's okay, but you're going to take them off and not have all of them as your statement, right? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do that, and then we'll have a look at what you got. Ta-da. All right, how we doing, guys?
Good.
What do you got, Beth?
Okay, so I got awareness,
Huh?
passion,
Mhm.
thoughtful, love, and thrive.
Say again, the last three again?
Insightful,
Uh-huh.
love, and thrive.
Thrive.
Hmm.
Okay. How do you feel about those?
Good. I wrote a little thing about each of them. So
Okay.
yeah.
So that
Yeah.
would give us the values of your project, the training.
Yes. Yes.
Now you'll notice that those would be very aligned with you, right?
Yes, they would be.
But they might not necessarily be the ones you would choose to describe yourself as a thinker, doer, and so forth, but they'd be close.
Yeah, they'd be things that matter to me. But what matters to me about the project will be slightly different because I'm doing it for obviously helping other people, but also for my family and yeah.
Yeah.
So
Cool. What do we got on the other side there, guys?
Okay, so we have decided that to try to figure out our life plan is a little massive right now. So we have to move, and that to move a lifetime to New York is massive. So it takes up everything. So we have to, so I have organization, just staying organized. I have timeliness, that means schedule things and make sure they're on time to achieve this goal. Consideration, because you have to consider other people who really are upset that we're moving and try to be considerate of everybody and appreciate the fact that we can move. So appreciation and celebrate every time we do tasks. So if we have 200 boxes packed and we just have to stay on time and do this and get there.
Okay. So how do you feel about those values?
How do you feel, John?
Yeah, I just think the project, devoting the time and completing the project would be providing specific actions and things that have to be done, providing a schedule and when they need to be done, providing clarity and what has to be done, and informative to others, and provide organization and planning. So that would be the project to me.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, since you're doing the project together, you want the values
Yes.
to align on the project. They might not be the same for each of you as a person, thinker, and driver, but not the project would need to be aligned, right?
Right, yes.
There's a lot of similarity there, but what you need to obviously also do is get into it and look at how can you clarify it so that you're both operating from the same ultimate values.
Yes, correct.
Just like any company, because you get Southwest, like we're looking at here, which seems to have taken every value that anybody said on the board of directors and stuck it in, as opposed to the Build-A-Bear workshop where they had 6 or so, which were clear, right?
Right.
Okay, good. So you might now ask, what does integrity ultimately have to do with the whole idea of innovation? How does it actually connect? Right? Like it's nice to have integrity, it's good, useful, it's productive, but how does it have to do with innovating? You have that question at all? Because if you don't, we can stop.
no, we can go on.
Okay. So here's one way, very simple way, right? When we're dealing with the idea of outside influence on your process, right? We already know that most very innovative thinkers had many times when they were questioned, when people didn't believe in them, or when evidence wasn't there to show that what they were doing was important, right? You know, the basic example that comes up again and again is Edison with 10,000 experiments in order to get a workable light bulb, right?
Mm.
And he wasn't the first guy. There were many, many people for 70 years before him. So there was very little evidence that this was ever going to work, right? And in many cases, we find, don't we, that the most innovative thinkers only start to get believed when they actually start succeeding. And often it's, although they succeeded at one thing, the next thing they don't get believed. So there's a whole lot of voices in the world talking, right? So one of the basic ways that integrity can start to influence, your ability to innovate more powerfully is when you start to clarify who you are standing to be and what your project you're working on is standing to be, and then stand for it firmly, right? So for example, when you guys talk about the moving being, very, very much, there's a lot of things around integrity in there, right? In terms of being organized and timely and stuff like that. If someone comes along and says to you, hey, it's no big deal, just chill, that's your choice, but you've made the choice that you want it to be a timely and process-oriented thing, right?
Yes. Right.
So when you start to have integrity around the choice you've made as a way of being around things, because ultimately, all of the values we've listed are a way of being, aren't they?
Yeah.
Right? Even the bears, it's either a being or an action which is driven by a being. So collaboration is an action, but it's driven by a way of being around other people, right? As Steve Jobs said, pointing at you, don't let the noise of others' opinions drown your own inner voice. So first thing is, in order to innovate, in other words, take a creative idea, have the idea and then put it into action, we have to be clear on that we want to put that idea into action. Right? So I want to look at something that's very, very important that we get clear about. And I think we've touched on this last week, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So when we look at the ordinary way that most people do things, we already have discussed how most people in the world will look at what do they have to get done, right? And then they'll try to do those things by putting them into a schedule or a to-do list or whatever, try to get those things done. Then at the end, they have the results they've gotten, which allows them to hopefully be the thing they're trying to be, right? So in your case, guys, you want to be New Yorkers, right?
Yes.
So in order to be New Yorkers, you have to do a bunch of stuff to get there, and then you'll have a house in New York, and your stuff you'll have stuff that moved there, and then you can be New Yorkers, right?
Yes.
So we looked at how actually that's a fallacy and how it starts with the being of it, right? And how in order to have things work, we have to start with be, and then that gives us what we do. And that's the way it just works. We don't do anything unless we're being a certain way about it before we do it, right? That's just how it works. So remembering that we looked at this in terms of identity, we can look at this in terms of integrity as well. When we want to tell the truth, we want to make sure that we're telling the truth is, first of all, that being comes first. There is no way for us to do something without being a certain way before we take that action, right? It doesn't matter what we say. What matters is what action we end up taking. That'll give us the clarity on who we're being if we're not sure, right? But as long as we're driving our process from being, we're never going to have a really strong opening to new ideas because we've already got it in our minds what we have to do in order to get what we want. Makes sense?
Yes.
As long as we already know what we have to do to get what we want, or we go out and figure out what we have to do, we're never going to be looking at the genesis of what's going on before the doing, which is who are we, right? So by looking at the values that we've started to embody, we can say, okay, those values give us who we say we are, right? And those values will be aligned automatically with the identity you said you are or the project is. So if you're looking at the project and saying, what are the values of the project? Those values will be aligned with the identity statement you already wrote last time. Right? I mean, they have to be. And they're really just a clarification of it, aren't they? Yeah? So it's not the doing that matters, right? Except for where the doing builds the being. Because we've noticed that sometimes you just have to do stuff in order to start to build the habit of being a certain way. So if you want to be an organized person, you have to start just organizing stuff. Otherwise, you'll never do it, right? So one way of tricking yourself into being different is to actually do things that that person would do if you were that person. Eventually, you be that way all the time. So when I ask you the question of what does integrity have to do with innovation, you know, my point is that it has everything to do with this process of innovation we're learning, which is this. You know, we have this generated identity that will give us a certain type of thinking, right? If we can embody that identity. But the question is, how do we embody an identity that we are not? Right? And how do we embody the project's identity when we are creating a project from nowhere, from nothing, from our minds? Right? And the point of that is, by adding the notion of integrity, we begin to be able to measure, to see if we are generating the identity the way that we say, and if we're not, to adjust that, and it will then give us the kind of ideas we are aiming to have, right? Instead of just having whatever ideas we are naturally going to have. So, you know, it's not only about having more ideas, but having the ideas fit into the direction we want them to go, right? And being able to implement them in the direction we want to implement them. Does that make sense? So it's a form of critical thinking in a way where we can look at our identity that we created, and before we even take the world of things we have to play with, turn them into ideas how to solve the problems, we first start to critically look at the problems in a different way. We start to look at the problems from the perspective of the identities and values that we've said we embody in our project embodies. Right? So if you have to move everything to New York and that's your project, you know, the way you look at it will be different depending on how you choose to be about it, isn't it?
Yes.
You could choose to be panicked and frenetic. You could choose to be relaxed and easy, right?
Right. It's getting to the point of not being frenetic and crazy.
Well, that's a choice ultimately, right? First you have to make the choice, and then you have to like bring integrity to the choice. So when I ask the question, what does it have to do with innovation? My answer is everything, because in order to have the thoughts that fit the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And really creative thinking or innovation ultimately is simply a process of solving a problem, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
The problem could be what's the answer to a crossword puzzle, or the problem could be how do I fix my life, right? Or the problem could be how do I, you know, how do I create a cure for cancer? It doesn't matter how big or small the problem is, always it's a process of trying to solve the problem. So in order to solve the problem in the way that you wish to means generating an identity around yourself and the project itself that will give you guidance into creating the kind of ideas that fit. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So when we look at that chart of, you know, this thing about the 8-step process that actually happens, we're looking at these 2 points, really, right? Before we incubate and after we marinate, both of which are basically doing nothing, right? We are looking at how do we take the stuff we've brought into our brain and start to interpret it so that we can think of solutions, right? And although we want to think of as many as we can, we don't want to think of solutions that simply don't fit at all, right? If we believe in, you know, stopping climate change, we don't really need to waste our mind thinking of solutions that are going to damage, right? Just a point, right? If you already know that you want to move in a way that's organized and relaxed, there's no point thinking of solutions that are going to cause you to be crazy and upset, right?
Right.
So by aligning the values that we stand for with the project and ourselves, we make the calibration and then the decision once we have the ideas much clearer for ourselves, right? Because we're already building a way of being and thinking that fits a choice we're making. That has nothing to do with who we were in the past or what the project might have been in the past. It has to do with our choice as conscious thinkers, right, of what we know will work best now. By doing that, it then shapes our ability to communicate with the subconscious in a way that's going to encourage the subconscious to come up with the kind of ideas that suit our choice. That all makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that integrity is very important in this process is the idea of looking at and measuring whether what we've chosen is actually happening. And if not, what ways is it not happening in, right? And if not, what ways, does it seem we could shift things to make sure it happens the way we said? Will put us in a position where that generated identity is able to give us ideas that fit the identity that we're claiming. And the simple way to deal with that, one way to measure integrity, very simple. What is this?
The wheel and the spokes.
Bicycle.
No, it's a pie.
Ah.
It's called by some people a life pie or a qualities pie, whatever. What you can do with this, and do it very quickly now, is draw a picture of this pie and put in the different slices each of your values. So actually do it on the outside of the circle. So right on the outside of the circle, write your values. If you have space left, which you will, because I think all of you said 5 or 6, put a couple of ones that you dropped off, but that are still important to you to make up the 8 pieces, right? And then what I'm going to have you do very fast is, on a scale of 1 to 10, have a look. How much is the value you've declared for your project actually happening now? No excuses, right? No, well, it should be better, but you can't expect that it would be blah, 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 because it's early in the process. Doesn't matter. Even if it's fine the way it is, where does it go on a scale of 0 to 10, right? 0 would be right at the center of the circle. 10 would be right at the outside edge of the circle. We're just going to do this quickly. You're going to do it again during the week, and one of the mails you'll get is going to ask you to do it. But for now, just to get an idea of where your values in reality are sitting. And then if you've written on a piece of paper that you can hold up, then hold it up and let's have a look when you're done at what your measurement of your actual reality, right, of your values statement is in your project today.
Mm.
And basically you can connect the dots together so you'll get some kind of a shape, right? The shape might be a little bit odd. Probably not a perfect circle or anything, but
what do you do with it?
If you want to accept your voice right on the outside of what some of those may be.
Then make a list what's most important.
No, don't make a list of anything. Just put a measurement of from 1 to 10. I mean, 0 to 10, 0 being in the center, 10 being at the edge of where each thing actually is right now in your project.
Where it is, what?
In your project right now, right?
So 0 is the best.
No,
Start.
zero is not the best. 0 is the worst.
Okay.
Okay, and I mean, by now you guys should be done, I think. So let's have a look at somebody's chart.
You're supposed to make a list. Then you make a list of it, Mike?
No, there's no list.
So how would
Draw
you-
a circle like we have here.
Yeah,
Draw
So
the
it's-
pieces of pie.
it doesn't help.
Yep, that's exactly right. So each quality's there, and then you put a dot in the place between 0 and 10 where you believe your quality is at this point.
I need to change mine.
Okay, I get it.
Right? It's a very, very simple way of measuring where you are, what you promise about the person or the person you are or the project is, right? Very, very simple way of doing it.
It doesn't even make sense.
Yep, that's correct. Now draw a line between each of the dots.
Between the dots.
I can't do the dots.
I mean, you've made the dots, right? So now just connect the dots.
So
Yep. Exactly like that. So have a look at that again. Okay, it's a little hard to read.
yeah,
It's a bit out of focus, but can you hold it up again, please? It's hard to read what they say, but you can see, you can't see the whole thing. Now we go. So you can see that there's a big lopsidedness on the left side of that, right?
yeah,
So you know the areas you need to work on now,
right.
right? The ones that are way up on the top, you're doing well with, and the ones that are not going well, right?
Yeah.
Now here's the thing about integrity, okay? Do you feel in some way like judging yourself for the places where you have a low score?
Say again.
Do you feel in some way at all like judging yourself for the places where you have a low score?
I don't know.
In other words, do you feel like there's something wrong with those places or something that you're doing wrong? Hello?
Yes, I guess that we just don't take the time. So relaxation is one of them.
Okay.
So it's very hard to relax knowing that we have all this to do.
So do you feel bad in some way, like you're not relaxing enough and that's wrong?
I don't know how I would express it.
Okay.
Maybe if I relax more, it would fall into place better.
Okay. I'm just trying to draw your attention to that most people, when they're not in integrity with their promise to themselves, will start to make themselves wrong about it, right?
Okay.
They'll start to say there's something wrong with that, or that's, there's something bad about me, or I'm not good at this, or whatever, right?
Okay.
Beth, we can't see yours because you have no picture, but why don't you describe it to us?
So
I would think this like that.
So some of it is good. There's just a couple of where, like passion, for example, like sometimes it's just when you have to sit down and do something, some days you don't feel like it, even if it's been put in your diary. So that's something I need to work on.
Okay.
And then the other one was insightful. So sometimes it's the same thing. If I'm not feeling it, then you don't feel like you're getting the insights that you need to be able to do it. So
Right. Okay.
then the rest of them,
Sorry?
yeah.
No, go ahead.
And then the rest of them were pretty much the same, like 7-ish, 7, 8. Like I don't think they're ones that I'm too concerned about. It's more that sort of insights and passion that came up.
Okay. Now, same question to you. When you look at insights and passion, for instance, do you feel somehow that there's something wrong with the fact that you're not having those work?
I don't think so. Not anymore. In the beginning, it was definitely something I was beating myself up about. But now that I've kind of found a safe place and safe times that and I get myself into that, I've found that it is moving, but there is still days that, if I could find something else to do, I would probably find something else to do some days,
Sure.
So it's becoming aware of that.
Okay. No, good, because, like I said, a lot of people will take the idea that they're not in integrity and turn it into a moral or emotional judgment, right? And that is not at all useful, because that's also out of integrity on its own.
Yeah.
So I want to introduce you guys to another way of dealing with integrity in your project, which is a process of two things: debugging and challenging assumptions, right? And this is, for some people, their favorite moment in this entire process. I've had several people who really felt like this is the thing, So debugging is a very simple thing, which is actually a little bit hard to do. What we want to do in debugging is look for the things in your project that are wrong with your project as it is, right? Now, that does not mean that they're actually wrong. It just means that you want to consider alternatives to the reality that you've agreed with yourself on, and see what else could be thought of, right? This will help you open your mind to more ideas. For example, let's picking a very simple thing. What's wrong with a toilet seat?
It's not on correctly. It's like to one side or the other. It not be fitting exactly.
Okay. That's not really kind of always true, but I guess sometimes, right? What we want to find is, like, in a sense of integrity. What's wrong with a toilet seat? And you want to make your mind go crazy here. What's that?
It has a chip in it.
No, okay, I don't mean your toilet seat or one potential toilet seat, right? What I mean is
in general.
Yeah. So
if you're a guy, you have to always pick it up.
Okay, exactly. So one of the problems with the toilet seat is men and women have different positions they want it to be in, right?
Yes.
And the toilet seat doesn't deal with that at all. So one bug in a toilet, here's an interesting thing, by the way, just so you know. In the 1940s, there was a woman from Harvard University working on a computer, one of those big mainframe giant things they had at the time, and a moth flew into it, and they had to debug the computer. Where the word debugging comes from.
Oh, that's interesting.
than the real moth. But anyway, so exactly. So one problem with the toilet seat is it does not adjust itself for men and women to not have problems with each other and argue about whether the seat is up or down, right?
Correct.
It would be better if a toilet seat could be programmed so that it automatically did that. Now, does that mean, is that really a problem with the toilet seat? No, right? But it is in theory a problem, right? Another problem with the toilet seat, if you pee on it, it doesn't clean itself, right? Here's another problem with the toilet seat. In the winter, it gets cold.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here's another problem with the toilet
definitely.
seat.
Unless you're in Japan.
Always the same color. You can't make it change colors and stuff. You see what I'm getting at, right? None of these things are really going to bug you in your life very much. But would they help you have new innovative ideas about a new way of making a toilet seat? Well, they would, right?
Yes.
Because each of them would lead to a solution or more than one solution. Now, it may be not worth it, right, in reality, to spend the money it would cost to build a toilet seat that would move itself up and down to accommodate men and women. But if you're super rich, maybe you want that. I know that there are some toilet seats being made in Japan that are very, very expensive, or toilets rather, full toilets made in Japan. They're very expensive that do all kinds of crazy things that we don't know, right?
Oh, we've been to Japan and the toilets are crazy. They warm themselves up and everything.
Yeah. Right? So the future of toilets for people that have enough money for them is more complex than the toilet seats we have now. And they had to think of those ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, do we live perfectly happily without toilet seats to do any of those things? Yes, we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you could do your project the way that you're going to just do it, or you could debug it thoroughly, right? And look for all the flaws in your project, even where actually you like it just fine. Like you might be very happy that your toilet seat doesn't change colors. You might get freaked out by changing color toilet seat, right? But as an innovator, it does not mean that it's okay like that. Right? The flip side of debugging is challenging assumptions. It's almost the opposite in a way, but not quite. What that means is, what assumptions have you already made in your project that you're not noticing that you made? Right? I mean, no matter what, there are assumptions you've made that you didn't realize you made, even if you've thought it through quite a lot. Right? What's an assumption you've made about the moving project, perhaps, think about it, that you're not paying attention to?
Probably the timing.
Okay, so you've assumed what?
Well, the assumption is that you're not paying attention to the timeline necessary to do everything on not only the place you're living and the 50 things you need to get done versus planning for all the necessary things on the other end. So the assumption is if you can just wait and get it done, but that's not going to happen.
Okay, but you haven't really made that assumption, have you? I mean,
No.
One assumption you've made is that you're moving to New York,
Yes.
right? Now,
Yes.
Well, it's not an assumption.
well, it is, right? Because it hasn't happened, right? Anything that you've brought into the basis of your thing without having it already be done is an assumption. And that's the point of the notion of challenging assumptions is, can you just do the exercise of tearing the whole thing apart and looking at what are the assumptions underlying it, right? Like Beth, one of your basic assumptions is that you're going to do an online course,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? If tomorrow somebody came to you and offered you $1 million to do something else, would you still do the online course?
Probably on the side, I do think I would, but
Well, let's say Their
Then as well.
was they wanted your total focus for the next 2 years on what they were paying you for. Right? And I'm not saying you have to answer the question right now. What I'm saying is, it's an assumption, right?
Yeah, of course.
And some assumptions are better justified than others, but in the end of the day, they're assumptions until they happen.
Yeah.
Right? The future is not. So debugging, and that's why I say they're kind of opposites. Debugging is more like looking at the reality as it's been until now, right? So the reality of your project, if it's a toilet seat, is that until now, the toilet seat doesn't flip up and down depending who's using it. That's one of the bugs in it, right? So going forward in the future, you would want to see what are some ideas to solve that bug. Now, did I do the world's worst ideas game with you?
No.
Okay, so we're going to do that quickly as well, because I want to show you how coming up with a bad idea can often give you a good idea. So we're looking at debugging. What we're looking at is how do we look at the things that have up until now not been okay with the project if you really look at it and look at how can we solve those things, even if we're never going to solve those things, right? And the same thing with challenging assumptions. What we're looking at is looking into the future. Are the assumptions we're making necessarily correct, or are they certain? If not, what other ways could we see it, right? I mean, we will tend to do things the way we've always done them, right? That's the nature of the boxes in our head that we talked about a lot. So when we're dealing with assumptions, many times we're going to make assumptions we don't even realize we're making. So the value of the exercise of looking at what is the way that the future might differ from the assumptions we're making, right, can also give us guidance to how do we help direct it to be the way we want it to be. So the world's worst idea game is a very simple one that has been used to great effect by people in working out good ideas. The idea is to come up with the worst possible solution to the problem you're facing. Right? And it works very well in teams or in pairs and so on because you can bounce around really bad ideas. It takes a lot of pressure off because you're no longer trying to think of a good idea. You're trying to actually think of the stupidest idea you can. Now, let me give you a couple examples from history. There was a group of people working for Woolmark, which is the biggest, or one of the biggest wool companies in the world, right? And they were trying to come up with a campaign for New York Fashion Week. So they played this game, The World's Worst Idea, and what they came up with, the worst idea they could think of was to get a flock of sheep and run it through the opening ceremony in Manhattan. Just let the sheep loose and let them run through the crowd, right? Pretty stupid idea. Right? Probably brings all kinds of legal problems, liabilities, and all kinds of stuff, and probably not going to attract people to buy your clothing to see live stinking sheep running out, right? What this led to, though, after they got that idea was eventually they got the idea of a beautiful, tall fashion model walking down Fifth Avenue, walking several sheep on leashes in a photograph that became a very iconic poster for their company and was put up all over Fashion Week. Good idea. Came from the bad idea. Another example, a toy company was trying to come up with a new doll. And the worst idea they could come up with was a doll for small girls that was a prostitute.
Oh my God.
Right? But what that led to was eventually a nightclub doll that came with you could buy discos and you could buy clothing and stuff for the doll. Right? So the idea of world's worst idea is to come up with the world's worst ways to solve the problems you're facing in your project. So when you identify the bugs, right, and when you notice the assumptions you're making, you can also add to that, which way could you come up with really stupid ways to solve those things? And in fact, some of the bugs you'll notice are stupid, right? Ultimately, the idea of a toilet seat that changes colors just because you don't like it to be one color is probably not financially viable for most people. Or maybe it is, because maybe it doesn't cost that much. But no one's done it, right? So maybe it's a gap in the market, maybe it's just stupid. But the point is, by thinking of dumb ideas, you are able to start generating more ideas and eventually can have a really good one that you wouldn't have ever thought of, right? Often the best ideas come from the work, like very, very often the best ideas come from bad ideas. And what we do often is, as adults, which children don't do, we shut things down at the calibration stage, right? So we start to look at things, and before we even get the ideas, we're already rejecting certain directions. What we're now trying to do by doing the debugging and challenging assumptions process is to actually open ourselves up to everything possible. Does that make sense? So in the course of the week, there's one day where I'm going to ask you to do that stuff. Now I want to show you the last way that we can measure integrity that you're going to work on during the week as well. It's what's called circles of possibility, right? It's very simple and straightforward. If you look at your project, where is your project having the most trouble? We can call it stuck, we can call it, you know, sluggish, whatever you want, right? If you go to the outside circle of this diagram, that it represents what you could actually achieve, right? So Beth, in your case, it would mean, you know, what is the absolute best you could achieve in your project, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, most of us are, you know, if you've already solved all the problems in your project and it's like basically just a matter of going through the steps, that's fantastic, right? In that case, you probably should pick something else to work on or something more specific. If there's still stuff you're uncertain about or that's stuck or that's not moving the way you'd like it to, you know, what you want to do is measure that here and say, is it stuck on the idea stage? In other words, are you unable to imagine the solution, right? Or is it a confidence issue? In other words, do you not believe that what you imagine is necessary to do is something that you're capable of? Or, one level down, is it something you might even have the idea and you might even think you're capable of it, but you're afraid to do it? So, Mildred, in your case, talking about relaxing,
Yeah.
it seems to maybe be a fear issue that's stopping you there, right? You have a fear that if you relax, it's going to cause a problem. Would that be accurate?
No, it's just that they have this impetus to keep on going and get things done.
Yeah. And ultimately, when you underlyingly look at it, you've chosen to have the value of relaxation as one of the things you've chosen, right?
Right,
And you had a purpose to that, but you're not doing it.
right.
So would it be accurate if you think about it to say that you're afraid of something that's going to happen if you relax?
Okay,
Right? It's not a confidence thing like you don't believe you can relax. And it's not an imagination thing like you can't imagine what it's like to relax.
right.
It's a fear thing in some level. And the last level of this circles is what you might actually do, which is an energy block, right? So this is where projects die. Right? And in the past, when you think back to stuff you tried to do and never finished, this is where they end up eventually, always. Eventually, you just stop thinking it's worth doing, right?
Yes,
Although in both of your cases, the projects you're doing, I don't think are anywhere near that energy block, you might look at, are there any areas of them that are?
Mm.
And usually it's connected to some kind of, you know, you're tired of it, right? And if not in this project, just keep in mind for other things that you might be setting out to do, these are the layers where possibility dies, right? At the outside edge of this circle, everything is possible. As you move inward, things become not possible until you get to the center when nothing is, right? And since the topic next week is possibility, I'd like to just touch on this right at the end of integrity because it is a measurement tool, right? It allows you to see where you're stuck. Clearly. And again, like the debugging, a lot of people really like this very simple thing because they get a lot out of just realizing where it is that something is sticking, right? And it's a very simple thing. You know? Is it a fear block? Is it a confidence block? Is it an idea block? You know, and in a rare case, is it an energy block? In which case, you've got a lot of trouble. Fear block, you have to go and say, okay, I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I do this, so then what? Okay, so this week, I noticed that last week your mails were a day late. So you're actually going to tomorrow get your last mail for last week, or tonight, which doesn't ask you to do anything, so that's okay, but sorry about that. Basically, during the course of the week, it's going to ask you to debug your project, ask you to challenge assumptions of your project, check out your value statement, you know, make sure you're happy with it, create another value statement for yourself as the person running the project, as an innovator, and check out those measurements, and also reading chapter 3 of the manual if you haven't. Right, but that's going to get sent to you each day, so don't worry too much for now. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, or are we good?
Are you good?
I think we're good. I think this debug is also coming at a good stage because that's what I needed to do next anyway. Go through everything that I had as ideas and kind of start working out what actually works and what doesn't. So
Yeah. And really, it's an exercise that you can take pretty far if you're willing to really just go crazy. You know, you can do it inside of your personality, or you can do it outside of your personality. Guess which one's best? Okay, guys, thank you very much again, as always, for giving your time, and I look forward to seeing you in a week.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Yay, bye. Don't forget to celebrate.
Bye.
You too. Celebrate.
You too. Cheers.